Hello, welcome to the Healthcare Facilities Network. I'm your host, Peter Martin, president of Gosselin Martin Associates. Thank you for tuning in to part 2, or episode 2, I should say, of Filling the Pipeline Internship Challenges. This is the second episode in the series. The first one, hopefully you've had a chance to see. Filling the Pipeline episode 1 was the hiring process. And if you watched the hiring process, thank you for doing so. I know a couple of people who watched it who actually reached out to me subsequently to talk about their experiences. And so I was happy to hear those folks who reached out to me, and they were potentially interested in appearing on future episodes. And that's really what we are going for with this network. As I've said just countless times, we need an influx of people. And as people view these videos, which hopefully increases over time, again, we're brand new, please contact me. And if you contact me and we do shows by word of mouth and by volume, I am hoping to reach people. So we reach people, not just us working together. So I think, if you watched episode 1, the hiring process, and it hit home with some of your experiences, I would encourage anybody as you watch these videos, if it resonates, reach out to me. Would love to have you on, because by having more people on, we reach more people. It's kind of like, it's corny, I know, but at the end of Rocky IV, when Rocky defeated Drago, that's actually my least favorite Rocky movie. But Rocky gives the corny speech in the ring to the Russian people, or to the Soviet Union people, because they're not Russia at the time, they're still the Soviet Union. But he talks about, if I can do it, you can do it, we can do it. Kind of the same philosophy here with the Healthcare Facilities Network is what we're going for. We need those dominoes to fall. We need to bring more dominoes on because we need to amplify the message of the Healthcare Facilities Network. So that speech is over. A little Rocky reference is over. Stay tuned for episode 2, though, is internship challenges. Because, again, when we talk about filling the pipeline, one of the ways to do it is through internships. But we know, and you know, if you're in this field, that there are many challenges to the internship. It's actually interesting. I'm going to have an episode coming up in the next week or two. A gentleman reached out to me. He brought an intern in out at a hospital in California. And we're going to be talking to that intern very early on in the process. He's brand new to healthcare facilities management. He's a college student. So we're going to talk to him at the beginning of his internship. And then we're going to talk to him at the end of his internship to see how his views and perspectives change. So I'm excited about that. And those are the type of stories that we want to do here at the Healthcare Facilities Network. So with that said, I hope you enjoy episode 2 of Filling the Pipeline, Internship Challenges.
Go a little bit to kind of that intern route, if you don't mind. Yeah. For those of you who have hired interns, and I guess I'm looking at the, CJ, Lamar, Clay, you guys are in the role now. Are interns an avenue you've explored, or are there obstacles to bringing interns in? How viable are interns, and do you use them?
I know.
I've thought about it many times, especially with, I'll throw a little plug here with the New England Healthcare Engineer Society. Mm-hmm. We've been talking a lot lately, again, fill in the pipeline. How do we recruit and retain membership? And I've been pushing that we need to partner with Mass Maritime and a couple of these other institutions in New England to make a pipeline for their interns where they're pre-set up, and they know, Women and Infants Hospital has one intern position every year. Butler Hospital has one. And how do we get that rolling to make it?
You get within facilities, CJ, you have one intern position per year?
I would like to. Okay.
I
don't have it yet, but I would like to get there. Where right now it's such a roadblock to get it set up. No offense, Christine, but with HR and all the, paperwork that needs to get done, by the time you get it started, it's January. And now it's halfway through the school year, and it's just getting that initial ball rolling to get it done, I think.
We'll help any organization on our end kind of develop a good, robust co-op program, and it does take time. But I know Nancy's prepared to talk about the value of we have a cooperative education program that's mandatory. She'll talk more about why it's so valuable for both us, the student, but it's also super valuable for employers for filling the pipeline, which is exactly what we're talking about today.
Right. So
Lamar, let's go to you first. If you talk about that intern question.
Yeah, so as you know, Peter, I've had some success with interns over the, I'd say past 10 years or so. I've hired a couple have left me and moved on. So I actually echo CJ's concern about, nothing against HR. It's been, every year is getting harder because of labor laws and, all the kind of things you got to do. And again, nothing against them. I know they have to comply with the law. But my other challenge is, again, I would love to tap into the maritime school as well. However, we're in Chicago. The interns, may live in the New England area. So now I got to put them up, right? I got to put them up for housing and things like that. So that's been my challenge, because here locally, we only have a couple of colleges, but even that, they're 2-3 hours away. So now I got to put them up, right? So that's the issues, and the students have had challenges with, coming up with the money for the room and board, for the summer and so forth. So I'm a strong proponent of it. I just wish I could tap into more money to kind of handle some of those soft costs.
Clay.
Yeah, thank you. Going on the comments that Stephen Call made, I was glad to hear that there is programs. I used to hear a few years ago that, there was just a few like facility FMs that could transition easily into healthcare around the country, mostly seeing that exposure from ASHE. But so that's encouraging. But one of the things that my system is 53 hospitals, and with that can come a lot of bureaucracy in the hiring process, but also we have had the experience of a program where the company dedicated and made a decision that they were going to have a small cohort of interns. These people would be brought on as actual full-time employees and made the investment into salary right off the get-go with them. Now, they tended to be graduates, and we had one that I was worked with in the last year was just phenomenal. A mechanical engineering graduate, but the guy could do business analytics like there was no tomorrow. And, that just helps us in so many ways. And the acumen of, technology and those kind of things. But what I think is the difference is that we've also had an intern program, which is just busy work. It actually takes more time and less value to have something for these people. But it's just a night and day differences to the programs that are set up. So where I think the commitment can be made, because as was mentioned, you have experience that's wanted, whether it's 5 or 10 years experience, but how to get that. I see these internships in a very targeted way to help, cover some of that gap, just depending upon what interest they are when they finish the program. And the intent is that, okay, we're going to have somebody go through like 3 years of an internship, and then, still have them as a valuable candidate for wherever they might see their best interests align with the organization. So these individuals are on a rotation. They're going to different hospitals. They're going around the country. And it's been a very, I feel, dedicated, and I can't help but think it'll be successful in the end, especially based on the interaction that we've had. But the local kind of like fluff and buff internships for just those that they haven't even necessarily graduated yet, or are still seeking college level. It's like they're not sure, so what we throw at them doesn't necessarily, they don't have necessarily the expertise to help us with some of the busy work that we may need. That's been one successful thing that I've seen, and hopefully more of that can happen, because I don't know how else, when you have someone who has a degree in something, but yet the position as a facilities manager entails someone having that, knowing the other hospital support services, what they do, how it interacts, other trade understanding, that kind of a thing, it's a matter of time, and there will be a gap unless you've got someone who is just willing to absorb and work on it.
Christine, not that you need to, and not that you represent HR across the United States and for Clay's 53.
Well, I certainly hope not, considering I've had a couple of call outs on HR.
But and not even to put you on the spot, but I know that you are always willing to share your opinion. Thoughts on like kind of the not just at I'm not talking, you don't have to speak specifically to Bassett, but internships in general and some of the barriers that exist. Do you find that to be the case?
I think Clay is right in that, what I have seen from hiring managers throughout my entire career is that it creates more work to partner and have this internship where the person isn't completely contributing to the work that has to get done. And at the end of it, you've invested this time, and then they are either going off back to college because the internship is over, so they're not continuing with you, or they're going off and maybe working somewhere else. So I do think it's a fine balance in finding the right internship that provides exposure, experience, and opportunity, with also providing us, the employer, value in getting the work that needs to get done, right? Because at the end of the day, we have a lot of work and we don't need extra work, right? When at the end it's not providing value. If I could just ask a quick question, I've heard a couple of people mention the 5 to 10 years of experience, or in the education and the requirements, and it sounds a little bit like that's a pain point. And has anybody on the call had any experience, or have you tried to push back on that with your HR department?
Yeah, so I'll say, so my most recent hire, my manager, I hired him a year ago. He only had 2 years of supervisory experience. And, my HR department, they were like, hey, it's your hire. Like, you have the qualifications that are built into the generic job description, but if you feel like he's the right candidate, then we're not going to stop you.
My second, I've had 3 jerseys and now in over 34 years. So my previous employer, they tried to set a bar that they wanted managers, directors to have a master's degree. Well, that was okay with me because I qualified for that, but nevertheless, it became apparent pretty soon that they weren't attracting enough people. And so they basically rescinded back down on that. And so I don't really see that changing. I will see a lot of things where we are, if they want someone who has a degree in architecture or mechanical, electrical engineering degree background, that kind of a thing. So I don't know how much, that would very much help in facilities management. I don't know how much of that is a barrier. For those that don't have that, then something like CHFM certification might help fill that gap. It was interesting when employment seemed to be more booming, and then things changed and they had to back down.
Yeah, it's been my experience as well. We've eased on the requirements and hoping to kind of put some things together, as Clay mentioned. If you don't have the years of experience, do you have the CHFM, or we've even required you must, get to CHFM within 3 years of employment. So we're doing a combination of things that kind of ease on that experience.
And almost dictated by the market and some of those statistics. And I think, Clay, you just said it. When it was booming, you could be selective. Not booming anymore, unfortunately. I want to, we're coming up closer to the end. I do want to respect everybody's time. This is interesting. You create, or you kind of think of a topic you want to cover. And I honestly thought we'd get further than this particular area, and that's a good thing. So not a complaint at all. I enjoyed it. And what I'll do is create, at least for this group, kind of a meeting notes, because we want to continue to push forward. But what I'd like to end with, and Steve and Marianne and Nancy, let's just start with you, and folks, feel free to chime in, the folks outside of that education. We talk a lot about, and we hear it everywhere, kind of generationally and generation differences. And I don't want to create an us versus them, because we actually have a generations group that I'm going to be working with too, younger folks, to talk to them about, listen, how do we get people like you who are involved? How do we make this field attractive to your peers? And how do we get more? So this certainly is not a generations us versus them. But I wanted to ask, is today's student, we're talking about internships, and students have expectations. I have 4 kids between 17 and 22, and happy birthday, Katie, it's your birthday. So I see how they're different than what I was, but relative to internships and attracting the expectation of today's students, the groups that you work with, how has it changed? So I'm gonna ask that a little bit different. How have their expectations changed from maybe when you were growing up? And are their standards, are their expectations different than they were 10 years ago, 15 years ago?
I can start. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I'm sure you'll tell us what you see at work. So for us, for parents to go to work, right? Hopefully it's the same thing, or close to the same. But the younger generation that we're working with now, the data shows that what matters to them in the world of work are things like, obviously salary does matter, but it may not be the top thing anymore. They want to know what the professional opportunities are for them, that they have opportunities, what the career growth is for them within the company and within the field. They also want to feel valued and feel like they have an impact somewhere, which I think is really wonderful with this industry that you're talking about. They're going to have a huge impact. So you can kind of sell that as a selling point, I think. They also want to have a good work-life balance. That's very important to them. It has been for a while. That's not a new thing. And camaraderie at work, community and a sense of camaraderie in addition to salary. And anyway, the other last thing that is talked about is they want to have know that they're being socially responsible, or that the company has some sense of social responsibility. Those are kind of some of the key buzzwords with this generation going to work.
Thank you. Steve.
Yeah, what I'll speak to is the FM profession has matured and evolved, over the years. And so if you look at what the typical facility manager looked like, decades ago versus what it looks like now, that's changed. So traditionally, there was a huge emphasis placed upon technical experience. And now that FM role is becoming more of a business leader, understanding finance and data analysis and strategy. And so those competencies of what's expected of a facility manager, there is no, in my opinion, a perfect fit right now, because you have half of it, the technical expertise hasn't gone away, but also this idea of this business skills has really been added to it. So if you have a younger employee or a younger candidate, typically they're not going to have a lot of trade experience, but they're generally going to have an undergraduate education in facility management, many of them. And so you have to, as Clay mentioned, in your fellowship type programs, you may have to focus on giving them or helping them gain that trade experience versus an older candidate traditionally needed to usually go back to school and get some of those business skills. And so it's just a matter of understanding what the strengths and weaknesses are, what competencies these folks are missing. And traditionally, that was more of a business skill that needed to be developed. And now it's more of we got to help people develop maybe some trade expertise. So that's the difference I see, and kind of the generational differences between facility managers.
Thank you. Clay and Christine and Lamar and CJ, what about you? What are you seeing on the ground?
Well, I see a need that it seems to be all the more important, and it's been talked about very well in the past, and that's succession planning. But I don't see it happening within current organizations necessarily. I intend to give my leadership at least a year advance notice. Just recently, having hired a key position for our central power plant operations, from a time that it took a vacancy in mid-December, it took me pushing uphill amongst about 6 different individuals with an outsourced service for HR talent acquisition to finally arrive at being able to make an offer yesterday. So that's, in essence, that's almost approaching 6 months, and that's not for a facilities management position. So why not couple that with get somebody in here ahead of time who's committing to taking over, succeeding, and shadowing for at least 6 months. And yes, that's an overlap on the budget, but you know, there's, as we've described, there's so much to it that some people may not know what they've gotten themselves into, and we really want to make sure that there's a good easing the way for someone to leave and someone to come in that, you know, has gained respect and all of that. So I really see that to be an important piece, but I don't hear it talked about much anymore.
Great. Yes, I can add to that what Clay's saying, that the challenge I'm seeing is the younger folks really are emphasizing a work-life balance. And they say, I don't want to do what you do. You're crazy, right? You know, the 24/7, the this, the that, you know, the stress. And, you know, I try to tell them, I say, yes, it's stressful, you know, but it's rewarding. You know, I try to sell up the, you know, the upsides. And they said, no, I remember that time they called you when you were on vacation. It happened one time, but, you know, it gets escalated, you know, it happened 20 times. So the challenge has been, you know, getting them to see that other side. And they're really focused on the work-life balance. And then I can respect that. But, you know, they just said, no, I'm happy right here, you know, project manager or doing this particular role, right?
Well, it's interesting. And I wrote that down because we hear work-life balance all the time. And one of the episodes I would like to do at some point is, does this career, I mean, it has to allow for work-life balance, but how does it? Because like you said, you're accountable all the time. So knowing that work-life balance is a thing and folks are looking for it, how do you balance your work-life balance with your management responsibilities? Because it's got to be difficult to do, but can be done. I want to just lastly, CJ, Christine, anything to jump in on work-life balance is, you guys
Peter,
can go on that, but CJ, go.
I'll spin off that one real quick, because obviously, you know my history, and work-life balance is one of the most important things for me. You know, I have 3 kids, 10, 8, and 5. So nothing is more important than going home and having dinner with them every night.
Yeah.
And that is something that I struggled with early on in my career. And then I made it a priority. And unless, water is pouring through, the building's on fire, 9 times out of 10, everything can wait till tomorrow. And I've made it a purpose where, certain time of the day, I shut the computer down and I go home. It was much easier when I was a manager because, I wasn't on call 24/7, 1 week on, 1 week off. And when it was my week off, for the most part, I was truly off. And then once you get to that director role, even when my manager's on call, I'm still on call.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit harder, but it's still doable, and showing it and, leading by example. Family is always first, and at times work comes first, but you still need to remember that family's first. And having the leadership that supports that is what makes it truly possible.
Yeah, that is true. Last word goes to Christine. It just worked out that way. HR. Not planned.
This was great. This was all great conversation. I love hearing. And Clay, I think your points about succession planning, I would love the opportunity to do more succession planning with my leadership team, but it feels as though the tenure, right, of our leadership, or even those individuals who would be the plan for succession, the turnover is as such that it doesn't lend itself to do the succession planning that I think we probably all would love to do. Work-life balance is incredibly important. And I think we're seeing that, coming out of COVID more so. Now it's more than ever with the generation now entering the workforce, and they've seen sort of everything we've all been through. So learning to adapt to that. And then what I think we had mentioned a couple of times about pay and how healthcare lags in pay typically. And something that I know I've just had the pleasure of learning about from my time in operations is the reimbursement that we get for doing and performing the services is certainly not what any other industry would have to tolerate. So the fact that we do not get reimbursed for a lot of the services we perform, that makes it incredibly challenging then to have revenue to then turn around and spend on our staff. So,
wow. All right. Final word. There we go. There's a lot of great content here. I'm going to pour through it, and we can dive into some of these. I want to thank Clay. I always have a hard time with last name. Clay Silik from out in Washington, Marianne Richards, Nancy Van from Mass Maritime, Christine Perry from Bassett Healthcare, Stephen Call from Washington State University, Lamar Davis from the Shirley Ryan Ability Lab, and CJ Brown down the road at Women and Infants in Providence, Rhode Island. Thank you so much for joining me today. We're going to speak again if you guys are willing to. I'd love to dive into some of these issues. I knew it would bring up a lot, and this is why this issue can't be solved in just one broad stroke. So I thank you for your time. I thank people for tuning in. Peter Martin from the Healthcare Facilities Network. Thank you very much. This has been a presentation of the Healthcare Facilities Network. Please like this video and subscribe to our network and help us succeed in our mission of filling the pipeline.